Greetings from Stephen Gill. This is feature 8 of my conversations. This feature is about an interview with Dr. Sapna Parihar. The present feature is to answer a question by Dr. Sapna Parihar about Stephen Gill's treatment of myths in his works. This time, when she asked this question, she was doing her doctorate on the works of Stephen Gill. And she was doing her doctorate on the works of Stephen Gill at IKS University in India under the supervision of Professor Dr. ID Tiwari. Dr. Sapna is an assistant professor at a college now, and her supervisor, Dr. ID Tiwari, is a prominent literary critic, and he's also a poet. The question that was asked is, how have you dealt with the myths, particularly Indian myths, in your books, in your works? My answer was that myths refer to the stories about supernatural events that are associated usually with religion. In a wider sense, myths are of a symbolical nature to represent a cosmic process. For an individual, a myth may represent also a psychological state. I believe that wise men invented myths to teach truths, but later these myths were taken literally. Myths have been constantly used to enrich literature. Milton, Shelley and Keats, these famous poets, used myths for the enrichment of their works. Among the recent writers, I can include the names of James Joyce, famous name Franz Kafka, Nobel Prize winner W.B. Yeats, and T.S. Eliot, who have created personal myths or their personal symbols. Mythology is the study of myths. A myth represents a truth, and truth is cosmopolitan and eternal. I write about truth. I have used Indian myths more frequently and directly in my latest epical poem, The Amputee, and also in my sonnets, as well as elsewhere. Mythology has always been dear to me. Mythology always fascinated me for some unknown reasons. Critics have traced a strong A strong impact of mythology in my works, particularly in my epical poem, The Flame. Dr. Sudhir Arora has discussed the impact of mythology in my works in his book, The Poetical Corpus of Stephen Gill, and this book was published by Sarup Book Publishers. Dr. Arora has edited the famous book among scholars. It is called The Flame Unmasked, and Flame Unmasked is a collection of research papers by scholars, and it was published by Prakash Book Depot in India. Now, in this collection of research papers, some scholars have traced mythological influence in my works. There are obvious references to Indian mythology in my works, also in Dr. Nilanshu Kumar Agarwal's book, Discovering Stephen Gill. Another critic and professor, Dr. Anuradha Sharma, has done extensive work in this field. In her edited book titled An Interpretation of the Mind and Art of Stephen Gill, there is a scholarly paper titled Hindu Mythology and the Flame by Stephen Gill. In addition to modern epic, The Flame, my sonnets, as I have said, I have several references to mythological places and figures. I have authored 6 symbolist plays of Yeats to evaluate the Cuchulainn plays of W.B. Yeats. Cuchulainn is a mythological superhero of Ireland with incredible talent and incredible strength. He always finds a woman to fall in love, always ending in tragedy. Unknowingly, he kills his own son in a fight. W.B. Yeats uses this mythological hero to feed his own sense of nationalism. Some critics compare Cuchulainn with the Indian legendary hero Krishna. Canada, which is my adopted country, is not as rich in mythology as India is. Canadian history starts usually with the French, who came as explorers in the 16th century and stayed here to settle, although aboriginals, including First Nations peoples like Inuit and Métis, they have been in Canada for centuries. Canada's total population is about 35 million, and Aboriginals are roughly 3.8% of the national population. Roughly, Aboriginals are a little over 1 million. Aboriginals Aboriginals in Canada, they have oral traditions which are mostly about their origin, about their history, about their spirituality and morality. Aboriginals in Canada believe that life began on the continent of North America. I have discussed the Aboriginals in my novel, The Coexistence. Aboriginals came to Canada presumably from the east during the Ice Age. One of these First Nations is the Ojibwe people, who are scattered across Canada and across the United States. They have developed their own mythologies and culture. Now, Lino Lito, a Canadian novelist and short story writer, compares messages in my poetry with the messages of the mythological interpretation of Ojibways, and he traces them in the paper called Poetry of Stephen Gill and the Ojibwe of Canada. This paper has appeared in several publications and still is available online. Now, borrowing some material from Lino Lito's paper, I would say that the Ojibwe people believe that everything on earth is interconnected. In one of their mythologies, their elders had a good life when they lived in harmony with the plants, when they lived in harmony with animals and all living beings. Bad days followed when they began to fight due to jealousy, when they began to fight due to hatred, due to fear and anger. They believe that all humans are one and they are separated only by tongues in their prayer. Ojibwe people are sacred one. Teach love, compassion, and honor that we may heal the earth and heal each other. Now, Lito says that this is the view that Stephen Gill explores in his poetry as well as in his prose. The Ojibwe call the earth mother because she gives birth to all living beings. Lito states that Stephen Gill, like the Ojibwe people, sees a close connection between the earth and its inhabitants. This thought is present also in the culture of India. The development of the thought in the Ojibwe nation may have been the result of their close observations and their proximity to nature. Let us not forget that there are also modern myths that are not just pure fantasy, as classical myths are. Modern myths, we can say living myths, are about today and keeps changing. Their point of origin is good as well as bad about the predicament of life. One example is the creation of the jungle hero called Tarzan. As far as I know, there is no living Canadian myth in line with the myth of Tarzan, but there are some about the country. About 60 years ago, in the early 60s, when I came to Canada, before I came to Canada, for example, there was a myth that all Canadians live in snow houses called igloos. Another myth was that there is snow everywhere all year round in Canada, and everyone in the province of Quebec speaks French, and sex is freely available, and a lot about alcohol consumption. I have discussed all these and several more myths about Canada in my novel, The Coexistence. The above interview by Dr. Sapna Parihar. This interview was published a few years before my novel, The Chhattisgarh, that was published by Prakash Book. This novel, The Chhattisgarh, released in 2017, is about the rich mythology of India, and this novel is based on the ideology of peace. For the purpose of peace, I use the exotic nature of the mythologies around the jungles of Chhattisgarh, where the mega players of the Hindu epic Ramayana had ambled. In this novel, The Chhattisgarh, I have displayed my religious admiration for more than 6,000 years old mystical beauty in the heritage of Chhattisgarh that has inspired me to immortalize this beauty in my writing. This heritage has been blessed with the sages, and I am certain that their blessings will keep the heritage alive for centuries to come. The robins of my impulse, which inspired me in my creative exploration into spirituality and culture of Chhattisgarh, will also be inspiring them. Thanks for watching. In my next feature, number 9, I will answer a question asked by Dr. Shobha Divakar, and the question is about my ideology of live and let live. I have discussed this ideology especially in my novel, The Coexistence, and Dr. Divakar in cooperation with Professor Dr. Olympia Jacob from Europe, have edited a book titled A Study in Stephen Gill's novel, The Coexistence. The book was released in India by Prakash Book in 2016. Friends, thank you for watching.